Hello, and welcome to another IBMSpod. I'm Rob Dabrowski, editor of the Biomedical Scientist magazine. Along with my co-host, Jordan Ross, I'll be speaking to Dr. Sarah Pitt about virology and finding herself in the media spotlight as a pandemic expert. We then hand over to Helen Blackburn, who is speaking to Umar Siddiqui, who is not only a biomedical scientist, but also one of the stars of TV's Gogglebox. First, the news headlines.
Hello and welcome to December's IBMSpod. I'm Jordan.
And I'm Helen, and here are the latest updates from the IBMS.
IBMS President Alan Wilson met with Lord Bethell in November, the Minister for Innovation, to offer our support to the government's mass testing programme and to raise members' concerns. Lord Bethell was receptive to the issues raised, and it is hoped Alan's offer for the IBMS to be involved in training staff will be taken up.
The IBMS has published a statement summarising the main COVID-19 rapid testing options. It can be found in the show notes. It's time to renew your IBMS membership for 2021. All members should have received email correspondence regarding renewals. You can also find out how to renew on our website.
The NHS is consulting into the proposed change to the law to allow biomedical scientists to supply and administer medicine using the patient group's directions procedure. If you want to show your support for this development, be sure to complete the NHS's short online survey by the 10th of December.
In light of the ongoing pandemic, the dates for IBMS Congress have been postponed to the 14th to the 17th of March 2022.
The Science Council have honoured 2 IBMS members for exceptional CPD. Janice Harland was commended in the Chartered Scientist category, and Katie Johnson as a Registered Science Technician.
In November, the IBMS ran the Biomedical Scientist Live, a 4-day virtual event full of talks and webinars. For all those who couldn't make it, we are hosting a rerun on Thursday the 10th of December. You can register your place at live.thebiomedicalscientist.net.
Okay, so welcome to the latest podcast, everyone. And today we are joined by Dr. Sarah Pitt. Sarah, would you like to say a few words to introduce yourself about who you are and what you do?
I'm Dr. Sarah Pitt. I'm a principal lecturer at the University of Brighton, and I'm also a member of the IBMS Virology Scientific Advisory Panel, and I'm the Chief Examiner in Virology.
Brilliant. And this is your second appearance on the IBMS podcast, Sarah, the first person to have that great accolade. And the last time we spoke, it was almost exactly 12 months ago to the day, and it was a face-to-face meeting in your office in Brighton.
It was.
It felt like a very different time. How have the last 12 months in general felt to you?
Well, it's been a very interesting and challenging time, obviously. And the thing we were talking about last time was my potential breakthrough with discovering an antibiotic in snail mucus. And that research has been completely on hold the whole of the year because we had a few glitches and we had to restart in the spring when the snails came out of hibernation. So I'd actually gone out, collected a whole new batch of snails on about the 10th of March. And then, a couple of weeks later, we had to let them all go. So I'm sure they were quite happy about that. But the research had to go on hold. So I've not had the year, like everybody else, I've not had the year I was expecting at all. And my virology training has come much more to the fore this year than I ever expected. So that's been interesting, but definitely very challenging.
Yeah, I mean, this year you've basically become a spokesperson for the profession.
Yeah.
How did that come about? You've been all over the TV, radio, newspapers. What happened, Sarah?
Well, because, as I say, through the IBMS virology panel, I did a piece for the IBMS back in January, very sort of late January, and they put it out as a press release about the virus, about this new virus. They put it out as a press release and asked for someone to go on our radio. It was BBC Radio Scotland, and so I said yes to that. And then a week or early into the pandemic, the first couple of cases were in Brighton and Hove, so in my area. So the local BBC local radio, BBC Sussex, and also the local TV had asked the university for a spokesperson. So they put me up for that. So between the IBMS and my own university press office, they sort of both put me up to do some media work. And then it turns out that once you're on the system, particularly BBC local radio, once one radio station has got your phone number, they've all got your phone number. So, I mean, I suppose I could have said no, but I just said yes, because I'm keen to explain to people what viruses are, how they work, how this one was being transmitted, and more recently about testing and now about vaccines. I think it's important for someone to explain things simply and clearly. And so, given that I had the opportunity to do that, I was happy to take it, and I seem to have done okay.
And how have you found speaking to the media? I mean, have you found in general people want you to impart knowledge so that their listeners or readers can get it? Or have you found people are kind of looking for a specific line? Have you found journalists who are after a specific thing they want to put in the headline? Or have most people just been asking, tell us what you know about this?
Yes, a little bit depends. Some of them are really asking you to go down a specific line, and it can be quite difficult to actually push back from that if what they're saying is not actually what you know to be virological, scientific, correct. So some of the things it has been difficult at times to actually explain to people what I have actually been meaning to say. But I found I got much better as time has gone on, and I've been a bit more relaxed about it. Because first of all, I just thought, I must be really, really careful because everybody's listening. But then you realise that they sort of are, but you're sort of saying the same things every week. You know, this is a very dangerous virus and this is how it's transmitted. I've said that a lot. So it means that, yes, people are listening to you, but they want you to reiterate what you're saying quite regularly, which means they're not listening to you that hard, which is the story of my life, really. I don't think my students ever listen to me. So in a way, I think once you get over the nerves and start realizing that it's just an opportunity to chat to more people about your favorite subjects. I mean, I love lecturing for that reason. You've got a captive audience to talk about your favorite subject. So suddenly your captive audience is everybody in a particular BBC local area, or indeed in some cases the whole country, while you're talking about viruses.
Do you have to modify your language much? Because you're used to speaking to a scientifically engaged audience. I imagine it must be a bit of a step to suddenly be talking to, the general public and have to think, I can't use that technical language that I'm used to using. How does that work?
Very much so. So that has been something I've got better at as time has gone on. First of all, I think I found I was using a technical term and then correcting myself live on air. Now I'm doing that self-correction in my head in real time, live on air. But I can tell you that trying to explain to people about an antibody test without using the words antibody or protein or antigen or any of the things which we would normally use when we're talking to each other as biomedical scientists was quite tricky. But I think I got there in the end. And virus glycoproteins are the sticky out bits that you've seen in the pictures on the news of the virus. And everything else is a substance that sticks to the virus, that's antibody, and so on and so forth. So it's been quite tricky. Trying to explain PCR actually without using any technical terms is very, very difficult. But I think I'm getting better at it as time has gone on.
Brilliant. One more question in my section, Sarah, which is, what has been the most important thing for you to convey to journalists with this work? Is there a specific thing that you think we need to say about biomedical scientists or biomedical science that your focus has been on and getting that key message across?
Yes, I think it's important to remind everybody that biomedical scientists are the ones who are doing the tests in the laboratories, working really hard day in, day out, actually doing the work. The idea of having a lab test. I think people think that, I don't know what people imagine happens to their sample when it's collected from them by a doctor or a nurse. But I think this year has really highlighted the fact that laboratories are actually, A, they exist, and B, there's actual people in there, and B, and C, those people are very highly qualified, skilled scientists. I think we've had the opportunity to really highlight that. And I think that has been really important to do that. But I think the other thing that I've tried to do is to convey that scientists are normal human beings as well. We're not some kind of strange, geeky people that you can't relate to. I think that's what I've been trying to do. As I've relaxed into my interviews, I've actually tried to explain the human side of the fact that I can't see my mother. You know, I'm not trying to tell everyone they've got to stay in lockdown to beat the virus. And you know, I am telling them to do that, but also I'm doing it too. You know, I really want to give my mother a cuddle, but I can't. So I'm in the same situation that everybody else is. It's not like I'm especially enjoying this more than everybody else, because it's my subject. So I'm trying. So biomedical scientists, A, they exist, B, they're very highly qualified, and C, they're actual human beings. I think those are the three things I've tried to convey.
So that seems like the perfect point for me to pass you over to Jordan, who's got a few more questions for you.
Yeah, no, that leads quite well into my questions, because while the pandemic the impact has been terrible, undoubtedly, it's also provided a unique opportunity for biomedical scientists to become more visible to the public. How effective do you think your media appearances and the appearances of the IBMS been in increasing awareness of the work biomedical scientists do to the public?
I think they really have. I mean, I make sure that whichever station I'm going on, be it radio or TV, whenever it is, that the fact that I'm a fellow of the Institute of Biomedical Science is part of my title. So the IBMS gets a name check every time I do something. But I think even more important, our president, Helen Wilson, has been on, you know, BBC, Sky, BBC News and Sky News, the main evening news, and in the main broadsheet newspapers, issues about testing, which unfortunately have come up quite a lot. He has been quoted in newspaper, you know, he's been interviewed by journalists, so he's been quoted in newspaper articles in main newspapers. And I think, again, he's the president of the Institute of Biomedical Science, which means people have heard of the Institute of Biomedical Science. People who had no idea that we even existed have now heard of us, and I think that is really very, very good. You'll remember the listeners to this podcast might remember that Alan gave evidence at a parliamentary committee recently, which was just, you know, I don't think any of us ever imagined that would ever happen, but that's amazing. That is really, you know, for a really bad reason, a very good thing for the profession's profile.
And what do you think the IBMS and the profession and individual biomedical scientists stand to gain from this increased awareness throughout this year?
Well, I mean, increased recognition is always going to be good, isn't it? But also the other thing is, I think that we can use the increased awareness to explain not only what we do all day, but how important some of the tests we do are, particularly things like screening tests, to try and encourage people to take care of their health by seeking laboratory tests. But also another thing I think is important is to explain to them why some tests take longer than others, what to expect from a test result, and what's unrealistic to expect from a test result, and somehow a bit more about how the science of laboratory diagnosis actually works in a way that people can maybe relate to. I'm sure we're all used to doing it with our friends and family, but now we've got the opportunity to do that perhaps to a wider audience. I think that will help, because I think it helps with people who are using the laboratory service. If they understand a bit more about how the service works from the point of view of biomedical scientists and clinical scientists, then it's easier for us to kind of work with each other and provide a good service for the patients while getting recognition for the people who are actually doing the work.
Is there a danger that after the pandemic comes to an end, that the exposure will go away? And I guess if there is, how can we keep biomedical scientists in the public eye?
Well, I think there is. So which means that people who have managed to gain a public profile should keep on with that. I think the Institute of Biomedical Science is known to the press now. So that means that if we put out a press release about something not to do with the COVID pandemic, but something to do with laboratory testing in a different context, it's more likely that they will take us up on the offer of doing an interview or doing a newspaper article about it, because they've heard of us and they know that we're the ones who are the experts in that area. So I think it's probably a case of looking for opportunities to raise our profile, into next year and beyond. Issues which are nothing to do with COVID, but linking into the journalists and the contacts and the profile that we've actually got, and just kind of building on it, which I definitely think we can definitely do.
That's a kind of like a stepping stone into the future.
I think it can be. We obviously have to take that opportunity and run with it, but I think it definitely can be, yes.
So at the University of Brighton, you're currently investigating this stuff, how perceptions have changed towards biomedical scientists because of the pandemic. So could you tell us a bit about the project and the survey that you've launched?
Yeah, so I was very interested in how it feels to be a biomedical scientist at the moment with the changes in the public perception. And some of the things that people have been saying about laboratories have been very good, and some of them have been a bit, critical. But in the meantime, all biomedical scientists, whichever discipline they're in, have been working their socks off to support the patient. So either testing for COVID, testing the markers of patients who are seriously in a hospital with COVID, and then extra testing for all the patients who don't have COVID but have other things that need testing for, while covering for their colleagues who are off sick with COVID or who are in self-isolation. That happened a lot, particularly back in sort of March, April. So I was just interested to see if we could get a sort of a national picture of how that has been for everybody. And so I worked with a colleague of mine called Dr. Mark Erickson, who's working in social sciences department, to design a questionnaire which we put out as a survey. And it would be really good if we can get lots and lots of replies from people from any area of any IBMS members, even if they're not working in hospital diagnostic laboratories. They're still IBMS members, and the IBMS has been in a very high profile this year. So that's very interesting. People who've been working in universities, for example, how's that been for them? People who've been working in pharmaceutical companies and testing companies, how has that been for them? But also any discipline of pathology, because we've all had a very strange year. It's not just virologists that have had a strange year. So I'm really interested in how it's been for everybody. And I'd really, if anyone's got just 10 minutes or so, 15 minutes to just do an anonymous online survey, which is available through the IBMS website, then that would be really amazing, because the more information we've got, the more we can find out how it's been for everybody, and the more we can try and help them in the future.
And when's the deadline for the survey?
The deadline has been extended now to the 31st of December. So if you're a little bit sort of stuck for something to do over Christmas because your relatives can't visit, or because your relatives apparently maybe can visit and you're trying to find a way to avoid them, then that would also be fine, to any time up until the end of the year, actually.
Okay. And we're going to put a link to Sarah's survey in the show notes for anyone who wants to take part over the festive season.
Thank you.
And we couldn't have you on, Sarah, without talking a little bit about virology, especially considering the breakthroughs we've had recently concerning the vaccines. Mm-hmm. So my question is that the main COVID vaccines that are proven safe and effective from Pfizer, BioNTech, Moderna, and recently the Oxford vaccine, they're using a slightly different approach in order to generate immunity compared to the conventional technique of using the weakened or dead virus. How do they differ, and how do they work, these vaccines?
Well, the Pfizer, BioNTech and the Moderna vaccine have actually gone with trying to encourage using a bit of the viral genome, just trying to encourage the cells to produce viral messenger RNA, and thus to make the viral glycoprotein, the sticky out bit, which is called the spike protein. And so this was very new technology. There aren't any other vaccines in clinical use using that format. So I think one of the reasons that they tried it was because if it was going to work, and it was a big if actually back at the beginning of the year, then they would be able to produce vaccines more quickly than the conventional methods. Because, as you say, if you're trying to use a weakened version of the whole natural virus, you've actually got to spend quite a lot of time doing that weakening of the virus, doing that attenuation of the virus. And so that takes a lot of time, and then you've got to test the virus for safety before you put it into even animals to make sure that it has properly been disabled. So getting messenger RNA to fool the body into producing viral spike protein was obviously going to be quicker. And the Oxford vaccine is using a slightly more tried and tested method, which is where you've got a harmless virus. In this case, it's an adenovirus, and they've just swapped out a bit of the adenovirus genome and put in again the code for the spike gene of SARS-CoV-2, and so that's a little bit more further on in terms of how there are other vaccines using that method. For example, there's one that they developed against Ebola that was just licensed for use at the December 2019, so just about a year ago. But it's still quite a new technology. But again, one of the reasons they went for that was because it was potentially a faster route to a vaccine. And I think they were thinking, even if it didn't work that well, it was a start while we're waiting for the other ones to catch up with us. There is one that's being produced by a company, I think it's a Belgian company called Valneva, but it's going to be made in Livingston in Scotland, which is just a whole virus killed, which in some ways that sounds more likely to work, and it stops you having to guess which bit of the virus the body naturally wants to respond to. It gives you the whole. If you give the body the whole virus, the body will do what it normally does. But again, that's not going to be ready until well into next year because of safety issues in actually producing the vaccine at all. So that's quite good. And now we've got these three, which do appear to work much better, I think, than anybody probably imagined. It's really good news because we've got lots of options, and we've got other options using the more traditional vaccine development techniques also coming on stream potentially next year as well. So we could have lots of options for vaccines, which will be really good, because we have got to vaccinate everybody in the whole world, and all of vaccines that have come out so far need at least 2 doses. So that's everybody in the whole world needing 2 doses. That's an awful lot of vaccine doses. So the more different ones we've got, as long as they all work reasonably well, then the better chance we have of making sure that everybody gets protected.
Do you think now we're at the beginning of the end? Or
I do feel as though the light at the end of the tunnel has started to become clearer now. I'm starting to feel that it's getting towards the end. But on the other hand, it's worth remembering that if you look at pandemic viruses, particularly respiratory viruses, 18 months to 2 years is usually about how long it takes for the virus to either do what it wants to do and or human beings to catch up with the virus and start to bring the thing under control. So the 1918 influenza pandemic, that did go on until did go on until 1920, so that was about 2 years. But if you look at SARS-1, that went away after 18 months. The 2009 swine flu, that took about 18 months to work its way sort of through the system. And so it was always quite likely to be sometime in 2021 where we really got it back under control. That isn't to say that it will have gone away entirely, but it does mean that we will be looking at small local outbreaks occasionally, and so that we will hopefully be back to some kind of normal life certainly by this time next year. You know, at the moment we're talking about whether we'll all be able to get together with our families for Christmas, and it will be a very restricted version of Christmas if we do get together at all. But I'm hoping that next Christmas everybody will be able to get together, and we'll be able to have Christmas parties, and we'll all be back to some kind of level of normal. And so that's what one would expect just from history of pandemic respiratory viruses anyway, but also the fact that we've got these vaccines coming in and potentially some treatments for people who are very seriously ill with COVID as well. Those things are really helping to mean that even if you do end up in hospital, you're less likely to die from COVID and the complications than you were 6 months ago, which is also very hopeful and helpful as well.
So a lot of hope that we're reaching the end, at least of the most serious part of the pandemic.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm going to hand you over now to Rob, because we've got some questions from some members via social media.
Okay.
Fantastic. So we've had a couple of questions come in, Sarah. The first one is from Charlotte, a biomedical scientist in Manchester. We've only got a couple of minutes left, so we'll whip through these. But she asks, how has Sarah's workload changed throughout the pandemic? And if you've had to shift away from any research that you're working on, which we have kind of covered right at the start. So just to kind of take the question a bit further on, I'm going to ask, is your research going to start again next year? Are we expecting a new batch of snails in March?
Yes, I'm definitely going to restart my research next year. But we talked earlier about the amount of media work that I've been doing, and I've been doing all of that on top of my normal university job, and everything went online. So all the marking, all the teaching, even exams and marking exams all went online. So everybody had loads of extra work from the university's point of view. And then on top of that, I actually had all the media work and the work that I'm doing for the Institute around COVID. So my workload increased quite a lot. While everyone else is in lockdown learning French and pottery and things, I've been barely getting enough sleep. So I hope that answers that question. Mm-hmm. And I'll be back to my research next year, definitely.
So Iggy Mason is the president of the Biomedical Science Society at the University of West England. And he asks, how has the pandemic affected the delivery of the biomedical science degree programme, and have practical classes and placements been changed?
Well, at my university, we've done slightly fewer face-to-face practicals this term. We're hoping that that's not going to continue for too much longer. I'm not sure about other universities. I know other universities have also been trying to do practicals. And my placement students who are in NHS laboratories doing sandwich placements, those have continued as normal. Other students are on a placement as well. If the workplace has been carrying on, then the placement has been carrying on. I can't speak for all the other universities in the country, so that it might vary from university to university. But I think generally we've done our best to try and keep everything going as far as we possibly can. The thing with the practicals is we've had to do fewer practicals because we have to do them lots of times in smaller groups. So, for example, 2 weeks ago, I did first year microbiology practicals, and we had 12 groups, so sort of 3 a day, and we had to sort of do. Actually, we did the same amount that we normally do. We had to kind of just make it COVID secure. So, and in some ways, I think for the students, it was probably nicer because they had a bit more, there were sort of 12 students and 3 demonstrators, so they actually had a bit more attention than they would normally have, because they weren't able to work with their in 2s and 3s, which they would normally have. So the students weren't able to help each other in the way they normally would in a practical, but the lecturers were able to help them a bit more than they normally would, because we had more time for it. So I'm not sure that it's not the same as what you would normally have, but I'm hopefully sort of swings and roundabouts, and it's turned out all right, hopefully.
Okay. Well, that's the end of the questions. Thank you so much, Sarah, for joining us today.
Thank you.
For this month's Lab Life, we're lucky to be joined by IBMS Fellow Umar Siddiqui. Now, Umar is a biomedical scientist specialising in microbiology at Queen's Hospital, Burton-on-Trent, but you may also know him as a member of the much-loved Siddiqui family on Channel 4's Gogglebox. So we're going to hear about this in a second, but first, Umar, please could you just tell us a bit about your work as a biomedical scientist? So how long have you been a biomedical scientist, and what kind of stuff do you get up to on a normal day?
Hi, Helen. First of all, just want to say thank you for inviting me to chat with you. Yeah, so I've been a biomedical scientist in microbiology. Got to cast my mind back now because it seems like a long time ago. December 2000 is when I first got the job as a trainee. And I think a year after that, I got my HPC. It was known as a HPC back then, not HCPC. Yeah, it's been, I've loved it. The job is so varied, so interesting. Microbiology especially is still one of those disciplines where you still get to work with your hands. There is some automation coming in, but largely by and part you can still do tests, and they're quite manual tests. My day really, I suppose for any BMS in microbiology, starts with reading culture plates in the morning, and that depends on what bench I'm on. So I work in Burton, which is quite a small lab, but we still have a urine analysis section, blood cultures, enterics, respiratory, and wound swabs. So I'll start by reading plates, the cultures, 24-hour, 48-hour cultures, and then set up any tests, any subsequent tests for further identification. And that includes also setting up antibiotic sensitivities. So that's really the morning's work, and then after lunch is usually assisting the MLAs in putting up samples and doing any kind of microscopy, any kind of further work in the afternoon. And we discussed this briefly before, but the lab workflow has changed a bit ever since the COVID pandemic, in that the workload has dropped off slightly with the routine work as far as that's concerned, but now we've got the additional COVID samples coming in, so I'm also involved in packaging those, shipping them off, and then getting any results back and putting them onto the lab computer system.
Life in the lab, right, can get pretty busy and tiring, and we've all got ways to switch off at the end of the day, and for most people that can be kicking back, watching some TV, but I know that your experience of watching TV is slightly different to most people's. Please could you just give our listeners a quick rundown of what Gogglebox is, in case they don't know, and your family's involvement in it?
Yeah, sure. Yeah, so like you said, TV is quite a routine part of normal people's lives, but with me and my family and the other participants on the show, it's kind of taken on that extra meaning. What does it mean to watch TV? But yeah, as far as Gogglebox is concerned, where me, my dad, and my brother Bassett, we've been on the show. We're classed as regulars now, in that we've since series 1.
I feel like the nation has grown to love your family in particular. Like, you just seem like your interactions are so wholesome and genuine. And have you always been so close as a family?
I mean, what you see is more or less us in terms of the family dynamic. And that doesn't just include me, Dad, and Bassett. I mean, it extends to my other brother, Raza, who also appears on the show occasionally, and my 2 sisters and Mum as well. It's just that kind of, we've all got a very peculiar sense of humor that we've all tended to adopt.
Mm-hmm.
And really, I mean, I think with us, when we actually do get together, and if we're not being filmed, sometimes it will become too like an in-joke, and sometimes that doesn't always make for good TV. Yeah, I think for the most part, what you see, the way that we interact with each other is more or less the way that we really are.
That's awesome. Do you ever forget that the camera's on?
Yeah, I mean, you never forget the camera's there because it's quite a big piece of film, but you do forget that you're in the presence of something that is being filmed. It's quite a weird thing to explain. Certainly when we were first starting, we were it's camera shy, really, is the best way to describe it. It's like, this feels weird, but now there's a kind of familiarity about it. And the way that the people that we work with, they kind of ease you into it, and they appreciate who you are as a family and what's likely to provoke a reaction and the way that you're going to respond to a particular program. I mean, the family, me, Dad, and Bas, we're known for kind of like a dry sense of humor mixed with a bit of sensible opinions. And like, for example, say if Strictly Come Dancing is on, you'd never see us taking part in waving hands in the air or that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Because you mentioned Strictly Come Dancing, like they show you a whole host of different types of shows, right? You get reality TV, get Strictly, get some like clips from the news and things. Like, do you find that you're watching shows that you might not normally watch? And also, do you find that there are some shows that you just find you naturally would respond to more?
Yeah, definitely. They just show us a barrage of different shows, and I must admit, 9 out of 10 of those shows I probably wouldn't watch. I mean, I've just recently discovered Netflix, so I'm all about Netflix, which I do occasionally show some Netflix dramas and box sets. But yeah, it's strange because prior to participating in Gogglebox, I wouldn't have watched particular shows, but now I do. On any given day when we're filming, they could show you any number of very different kind of things. And you just have to get into that mindset, right, I'm watching something different now. So as much as we try and make it as close to people watching TV as possible, people aren't subjected to different shows over a course of time, like the way that we are.
Thanks so much for listening. We hope you enjoyed the episode. These podcasts are released monthly at the same time the magazine comes out, so whenever a new issue lands on your doormat, head back online to listen to a new episode. And don't forget that these podcasts can be used for your CPD. Take care and bye.